Hey, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us today. This is Etcetera Live on the Vibe. I'm your host, Kelly Barrett, and so excited today. We have Al Harlow in the house. I almost said in his house, maybe. But hi, Al. How are you doing?
Hi, Kelly. Well, fine, now that you're here.
Oh, we have by the way, I really like your background there.
Oh, this old
It's
thing?
much
Well,
nicer than mine.
I'm still moving into my house here, and it looks like the studio music room was the last thing to get attention. So I'm glad you can't see beyond this because it's a mountain of cardboard boxes.
And what are we looking at behind there, Al? What albums are those?
Let's see. Well, there's a top row. There's a bunch that we cannot see right now, but oh, this is just kind of booty from the war. You know what I mean? They're mainly Prism stuff, and yeah, there's boxes of that stuff lying around here too. I could start a museum.
You should, and absolutely you should. Put that stuff on display. So we have so much to talk about today, Al, and I really I'm excited to talk about some of your new independent projects. But of course, we want to talk about Prism, and I would like to take it back, if you don't mind, to the Seeds of Time days, to that era. Would you take us back a little bit, Al, and sort of give us some background?
Ancient history, yes, yes. We are now doing the archaeological dig.
True story.
In the tomb of Ramses here, yes. Well, thank you for starting. Yeah, I don't mind starting there. So, yeah, back in the days of our juvenile delinquency, uh, the Seeds of Time, which did become kind of the glue with the name change to Prism and the addition of Ron Tabak on vocals, that was the Seeds of Time, which with a great singer, yeah. And so, yes, a way back a when. Uh, I first met that gang. So yeah, where the trouble started, shall we call it that? Where things went terribly wrong. And it was during the psychedelic era. And I had heard that there was a band from the south side of Vancouver, and they sort of dressed with that Carnaby Street mod vibe, which was my, well, nothing's changed, right? And and so it turns out that they were playing a gig, with a light show and burning incense and all that kind of thing that was going on in 1967. And my band, my Harlow, I think I was called Segment 41 at that time. We were playing the same club like the next night or something like that. So I stopped by, and I already knew Lindsay Mitchell and Jeff Eddington from the William Tell and the Marksmen. That's going back one more step. But I met Rocket and John Hall and the gang that night I think it was June of 1967, and that's where the trouble started. So the Seeds of Time were kind of notorious. They were kind of the naughty boys. Detroit had the MC5, Vancouver had the Seeds of Time, and we got in trouble all the way across Canada. That was way too much fun. That will all be in my book.
We're going to talk about that, and I hear you got into some shenanigans, and is it true you got kicked out of Calgary?
Yeah, we were banned from Calgary. I can't quite remember why, but yes. You see, now I always think, and this happens for things like chart positions in RPM and Billboard magazine. I always think, well, Rocket will know the answer to that. So I should have Rocket right here beside me right now because he knows all this stuff.
Well, and we can talk about that a little bit later as well. But another little bit of your start in music, because I always like to know, were you a little kid that wanted to be in music? Did it come later in life? And do you want to tell us about the Dwayne Eddy albums?
Oh my goodness! What?
The Dwayne Eddy and his twangy guitar.
You know too much.
I have my sources.
Sure, but now we're really, digging back in there. Well, I'm just old enough, and I had an older sister, and so when Elvis Presley first hit, well, of course, I was just a babe in arms at that point, but it helped to have an older sister because you knew what the girls were into, and so that explosion was just, and I remember my mom and her friends. Everybody made fun of Elvis, and they all were doing the imaginary hula hoop, his gyrations, And but anyway, the penny did not drop for me until my older brother. Now I never there was sort of split, blended families here. So I never really knew my older brother, but he would stop by on birthdays and Christmas when I was a little kid. And he handed me a Duane Eddy album for Christmas. And then my birthday was 2 months later. He handed me another Duane Eddy album. So I knew that he was feeding this addiction, you know. And so, yeah, Duane Eddy, Peter Gunn, you know, Have Guitar, Will Travel, you know, Rebel Rouser. Well, of course, I just went berserk. And I immediately asked my dad for a guitar. And so I guess it's safe to say that that is really where the trouble started. And I can blame it all on my big brother.
And so how old are you at this time, Al? When you're getting these albums in your first guitar? How
I was well. I had a ukulele. So my dad was a bit of a record collector, and he had like rhythm and blues records and stuff, and the early Frank Sinatra stuff. And this was just in the living room, you know. And of course, my sister was going crazy over this new Elvis guy. And so with my little ukulele, I was doing air guitar. I was jumping on the sofa and jumping on the coffee table. You know, I was doing Elvis at age 3.
being a ukulele god at age 3.
Oh yeah. And then, but with the Duane Eddy, so that, you know, in those days, it was the guitar heroes like Hank B. Marvin of the Shadows, you know, and you know the Ventures. So these were my heroes, you know. But Duane Eddy had that sort of Marlon Brando thing, you know. He was the broody tough guy with the greasy hair, you know. I thought, wow, what, in a leather jacket, like who's this mysterious guy, right? He's kind of like the Marlboro Man, yeah. So that was this sort of, he like a movie star kind of guy, and he had that twangy, low, real macho thing, right? So I thought, well, there you go. That's all I need to know. Let's do that.
I'll be getting chicks in no time.
Yeah, that was also in the back of my mind.
You were thinking
cars and guitars and girls.
You go on with Prism, and of course there was, you know, the sad tragedy of Ron Tabak, yes. His passing in 1984. And I'm just curious, what was that like for you to take over that role? Because, you know, it's one thing to step into the shoes of somebody that has just left the band of their own free will, but to, you know, to take over and step into those shoes, you know, and such an amazing voice, which you equally have as an amazing voice. And I can't imagine anybody else doing Ron Tabak's vocals. But what was that like? Was, you know, to take on that role of somebody that has, you know, has passed on?
Well, thank you for phrasing it that way, because it was a very slow process, and I can go on record right here in saying that that I was not in favor of Ron's leaving the band, and Henry Small took Ron's spot in singing for the band. And I knew that, well, you know, I mean, Henry's an incredible singer and still is, but no one can take Ron's place. You know, nobody had a gift of a voice like that. You know, a lot of my friends can sing. You know, I take a stab at it myself, but everyone's different. You know, so you have to express what's inside, and so. Even though Henry Small was a fantastic singer, and we did make an album with Ron, with Henry, but we kind of learned our lesson. Like Prism was Prism because of the chemistry, because of the songwriting, and because of Ron's voice, right? So when we lost Ron, we were actually taking a Christmas break in 1984. And we were putting the original band back together. So can you imagine that as soon as New Year's came around, we were putting the original 5 back together, and it had only been like a year and a half or 2 years since. Right. And so we were quite capable of picking up where we left off, and that was the moment that we lost Ron. So for a number of years, like for 4 years, there was no Prism at all. We walked away from it, and then we went to this chapter 2, which all Canadian bands went to. I call it the black and chrome club era, you know, where these big rock all across Canada. So we all started doing that, you know, us, Chilliwack, Streetheart, Headpins, you know, all of us got on that sort of chapter 2 circuit. And so for that chapter, I call it chapter 2. Maybe that's chapter 3 because we did have Henry there for a while. But Darcy Deutsch sang with us, and he sang with us for 15 years.
Wow.
Yeah, and so I always frame this as saying, well, I was always the high harmony guy. You know, there's lots of photos, you know, on the web of Ron and I sharing a microphone. You know, so Ron and I could harmonize quite well. So the way I like to sort of simplify this is to say that when Darcy left the band, all I had to do was start singing the verses as well as the choruses, and that's how I came to you know, to take over the vocal job. So that was really 2002, 2003, right in there. Yeah.
Right. And you know what, if a person was just hearing Prism for the first time, you would really all not know that it was any other way. You know, that high falsetto that you have, and you know, and so Prism goes on to have you know, 8 albums, multi-platinum albums, you know, 2 Juno Awards, 1980 for the amazing album Armageddon, and of course 1981 for Group of the Year is the award. And you know, Armageddon is absolutely one of my favorite songs. You know, to me, it's just like that quintessential rock and roll anthem. And there's an interesting story that I think a lot of the viewers won't know, but would be really interested to hear. You know, the beginning of the song, you know, when the military style drums kick in, and then, you know, Mark comes in with those, you know, the keyboard parts, and then you hear the pilots, you hear the pilot jargon. Do you want to tell the viewer where that came from? Because that's a really interesting story.
Yes. Well, Rocket Norton's girlfriend at the time, her father was a former Canadian Air Force pilot. We had the real guy there. And Bruce Fairburn, of course, was our producer.
Right.
And so this idea to have this crosstalk came in. And so Rocket's girlfriend's dad came in and said, sure, what do you want to know? And so we said, well, what do those pilots say to each other? What do you guys say when you're actually scrambling? You know, if the Russians are coming in, what are you guys talking about? And so he wrote out the script. He says, this is exactly what we say. And so they split the script. So Bruce Fairburn is the voice, I guess, on the left side of the stereo speaker. You know, you put the headphones on.
Because it's in stereo. It's in stereo, yeah.
Yeah, and so Rocket's father-in-law, shall we call him, is a real Royal Canadian Air Force pilot, and Bruce Fairburn, our producer, is the other voice, and they're actually talking to each other with the real language.
I think that's amazing. When I heard that, and I immediately went back and I listened to Armageddon in a whole new light. You know, to have that authenticity, I think that is just so cool.
Yeah.
And you know, of course, to have Bruce Fairburn as a producer, it's like, wow, you know, it doesn't get much better than that. You know, with him producing, you know, Aerosmith, Van Halen, In Excess, Loverboy, like, you were in really good company. And you know, what a gift to have Bruce Fairburn on board.
Yeah, Bon Jovi, all the stuff that he did, yeah.
Oh, huge.
And we really have to kind of turn the calendar back, because in those burgeoning moments, in those early moments, nobody knew what was going to take off. You know, I mean, I remember Bryan Adams as being this 16-year-old kid hanging around. You know what I mean? So, I mean, it's quite fashionable in Vancouver for people to say, well, I knew this guy or that guy back when. I knew this guy was going to be huge. Well, nobody really knew that, you know.
You didn't.
No, even we ourselves, who knew where it was going to go? So Bruce Fairburn was the trumpet player from the Sunshine Band. I mean, that's who he was at that moment, you know. And so his genius as a producer unfolded as we went along. You know, he went from Prism to Loverboy to Bon Jovi and Aerosmith, and well, you know the rest. So, yeah, I mean, and you know, as Bob Dylan recently said, I have nothing but affection for all who sailed with me or with whom I sailed. You know, so I just look back on everybody involved with a great amount of affection.
Absolutely. And so there was a period of Jim Valance and Bryan Adams meeting, and I heard something about there's a legend on how they met, but I think you know the real story on how they met. Give us the juice, Al.
How do you find out all these things?
I have sources.
My book isn't even out yet. Well, yes. for however long we've been reading this, I guess the legend has it, and I'm sure this is in other people's books, right? That Brian and Jim were on 4th Avenue, which is where the Long and McQuaid music store, guitar drums store, was located at that time in Vancouver. And that's where they met, looking at guitars and drums and keyboards, in this big music store. And yet, I'm sorry.
Sounds rock and roll. That sounds rock and roll.
That's pretty rock and roll. It makes for a good story. But I beg to differ. And Jim and Brian may, I should ask them too. I said, jog my memory here, guys. But I seem to remember. So in any case, we, and I say we, Prism, which at that moment still included Jim, because as Rodney Higgs, he was still writing songs for us, and we were assembling songs and looking at songs in a little demo studio on 3rd and Burrard. So if you know Vancouver, it's not there anymore. There's a gas station there, but there was a little studio called Psychord, like PSI, Psychord, CHORD, chord, as in guitar chord, Psychord. And it was a little demo studio. And so there was this little 5-minute period where all the songwriters in Vancouver were knocking at the door and submitting songs for the next Prism album, which was going to be See Forever Eyes. Well, of course, Jim was already, the #1 primary songwriter. There's the man who wrote Spaceship Superstar, Open Soul Surgery, Take Me to the Captain, It's Over, And so Jim was there. And I remember Brian walking through the door there. And I mean, Jack and Tom Lavin were there. There's a whole bunch of us, and we were just doing these really quick run-throughs of all these songs. Anyway, there was a health food restaurant across the street, and so we were just taking little luncheon breaks. So I just thought, okay, well, I'm going to run across the street and grab a sandwich and a cup of chamomile tea. So I ran across the street and ordered my bean sprout sandwich and with my little tray, and I was looking for a place to sit down. And I looked in the corner, and here is Jim Valance and Brian Adams, and they're just engaged in conversation. Like I could see the intensity. So these guys were having a really enthusiastic meeting. So I'm standing here with my tray with my sandwich on it, and I thought, well, I'm not going to interrupt that. So I sat in the other corner of the restaurant. But in my mind, they obviously had walked across the street from the same studio. We just happened to be taking our lunch break at the same time. And so I look upon that, and I said, well, there you go. That's the meeting right there.
They actually met at a beach place, not long ago. So
yes,
that's an interesting little tidbit. And now I have a question for you here. So, when Prism starts, these albums start going multi-platinum, and the Juno Awards are coming. I asked this question of Lee Aaron to you because it fascinates me. Is there ever that moment, or when is that pivotal moment when it becomes real to you? Like this is getting huge, and this is happening, and this is going to be a big thing. Is it like a burning bush moment, or was it just kind of a gradual realization that this is going to be something huge?
Yes, you're right. That's very subjective, isn't it? And those moments do happen. Well, I remember hearing my song "Take Me Away," excuse me, on the radio for the first time. And I thought, okay, this is real. like I wrote that song and now we recorded it, and now it's, whatever, top 10, top 15 or whatever it got in the charts. And I thought, okay, that tells me that's tangible. But I think the real explosion, that aha moment that you're
right.
Yes, that real moment. We were playing a gig, and we'd already been on the road. We were in the States for a whole year or something in that first year. And I remember distinctly, we were playing Texas A&E, and there was 18,000 people in front of us. And the last song to go on the See Forever Eyes album was my song Flying, which is also the title of my book.
The title of your book.
Yeah. And so I wrote it quite quickly, because it was the last. We had to get it on the album, and everybody was quite enthusiastic, and it was the first American single off the record, all that kind of stuff. So, Bruce Fairbairn considered it an important song. So, we slid it on there right at the end of the recording sessions. So I had been sitting at my kitchen table, with a pen and paper pad. The lyrics were the last thing that I wrote, So I remember distinctly writing this thing at my kitchen table and scratching things out and whatnot. And not 6 months later, I'm on stage at Texas A&E in front of 18,000 people. And I can see the audience with their Bic lighters doing this, and they're swaying back and forth, and they're singing along with the song. Which,
they know the words.
Yeah, so I'm thinking, okay, 6 months ago at my kitchen table, I'm scribbling these words, and now I'm looking at an ocean of faces singing along with every word. And that was a revelatory moment for me. I thought, okay, this is real.
I would imagine, to go from writing it and then to be connecting with, with people who know the words. And man, once you get the lighter and the sway, you're in.
It was the cell phones would come later. Yeah, Bic lighters.
Right. And another interesting 2 of your songs, they have surprising ways that you came up with the title. And maybe you could tell us a little bit about, and I'm speaking, of course, about Young and Restless and Another World. And as I'm saying that, some viewers might already be thinking that sounds a little bit familiar, and it should. So do you want to go ahead, Al, and share with us how you came up with those two titles? Because I think it's an amazing story.
Well, thank you. And, credit where credit is due. At the beginning of this interview, I mentioned Lindsay Mitchell, and Lindsay and I were in the Seeds of Time, of course, and we met when we were like 15, 16 years old. And so we were guitar buddies, We were both fans of the British First Wave and the guitar bands like the Yardbirds and Peter Green's early Fleetwood Mac. So we were kind of brothers in guitar, shall we say. And he wrote Armageddon and Night to Remember. So, and Lindsay was the core, one of the founding fathers of Prism with Bruce Fairbairn, and he discovered Ron Tabak and all that. So when it came time for the Young and Restless album, we decided to kind of woodshed together in my little bachelor pad overlooking Kitsilano Beach in Vancouver. And I had a little demo recording studio in there. And so we would get together at like 11 o'clock in the morning every day to write songs. Well, I'd had the television would be on with the sound down, And so we're looking across the room at the screen, and here's all the soap operas, And so you'd see this, the title on the screen, The Young and the Restless, And as you say, Another World would come on right after. So we had the sound down, but we're watching the graphics and we're watching the credits roll by as we're writing lyrics. And how hilarious is that? So I know we've all heard stories of the Beatles, being for the benefit of Mr. Kite and Good Morning, the cornflakes box, but you can pull inspiration from any corner of the room, right?
And there it is. That's proof right there. I mean, you would never think that two of these iconic rock and roll songs would have been born. The titles would have been born out of women's stories. Not so rock and roll. So I appreciate you sharing
Not
that with
us.
us.
Rock and roll, but no, you can translate.
Not to take away your street cred or anything, but those are good titles.
Well,
and from sometimes from the most unlikely sources, right?
Unlikely sources, and you're also looking for like for example, Chuck Berry, the words that he wrote, they just roll out of your mouth like Shakespeare, C'est la vie to the old folks. It goes to show you never can tell. I mean, you can just sing them in your sleep. And so something like Young and Restless, that rocks. I mean, if the television show aside, like that, those words just belong together, So
They sure do.
I'm a demo pack rat. I've got all the demos, So I don't know whether that's dangerous or not, but Jim Valance and I used to get together with our little demo collection, and he would guest lecture for me when I taught at Capilano University, and of course the kids were thrilled, the students were thrilled to hear the demo versions. So when it came to Young and Restless, I've got tapes of not only us strumming it and sort of teaching it to each other and writing it, but we're also mumbling away as to what the words should be. And the original chorus was 1 time lucky, you know, 2 times down, 3 times bleh, and it's over now. Well, of course, no, that's not good. You know, young and restless. Okay, that sounds better. Running out of control. You know,
it's so hooky, and it's so it just, you know, that the title "Young and Restless" is such a rock and roll reference, because it reminds me of just that, you know, that being young and wild and wanting to get out and conquer the world, and you don't have a lot of cares and worries, and you're just going for it. And so yeah, great title. And you know, you touched a little bit on the Capilano, and that was one of the little bits I was going to bring up for you. You were teaching writing at the Capilano. You had a guest lecture series at the Capilano University for quite some time.
yes, I did. It was like I got to play hooky, because I would usually do that when Prism went on the road. You know, it's time for the guest lecture series. I won't be here. You know? But no, sometimes I was there as often as I could be. But yeah, you know, what do they call that? The imposter syndrome? Like, I always thought as I'm walking down the halls of Capilano College that someone's going to find out that I don't belong there. I'm going to get busted and thrown out. You know what I mean? But the head of the music department was a really lovely fellow named Mike Reevely. And Mike understood my sordid little checkered life. And so I made a deal with him. I said, you know, if I have to go on tour with Prism, can I just slide in some guest lectures and nobody has to find out? And he goes, yes, you can do that. And it turned out to be a bonus. It was really good.
Right.
It was a good vibe, because they could put posters up all over the campus and say, ladies and gentlemen, Long John Baldry will be guest lecturing in the lecture auditorium. You know what I mean? And so I would bring in,
back before the internet. Like, so there wasn't as many means of advertising as there is now. Like, putting a poster up was a big thing for advertising back then.
It really was, yeah. So we would get the word out. And it was fabulous. And so yeah, Jim Valance, as you say, and I had a whole bunch of them, and it was wonderful. If I could be there, of course, I was just kind of sitting in the back row eating popcorn. You know, this is my class. Well, welcome to Al's Rock and Roll 101. You know?
And so, did people know when they were going to these classes? Did they know that it was going to be Al Harlow teaching the class?
Oh yeah, we got away with murder. And now I guess I should paint in some context here, because you know, this was before the rock school videos and, you know, that kind of stuff, right? It was a fresh idea at the time, and the way it started was I just got back off the road from one of the larger Prism tours, so it was in our during our initial 15 minutes of glory, shall we say. And I got a phone call to come in and guest lecture in the lecture auditorium. So, you know, they weren't offering me a position or anything like that. It was, would I come in and talk about my wild life, you know? So, I think the topic was hit songwriting, like how to write a hit song, something like that.
Right.
And so I said, yeah, sure, you know. So I grabbed a bottle of water and a towel and I went for it. And after the lecture, which they told me was successful, especially when you do the question and answer at the end, you know, and they said, oh, that was great. And they said, would you like to come in and teach songwriting? And so, again, that's pretty standard stuff now. You know what I mean? You can do it online now, right? There's all kinds of symposiums and forums, as we know. But back then, that was an extremely original idea. And I didn't have to do it. You know, I didn't need the money or anything. But I said, right, that's a fantastic idea. Yeah, okay. And so we did that. And it was actually a credit course. It was actually a university transfer credit course. And here I am, just this joker off the street, you know. And I said, all right, I became Professor Al.
You're kind of like that, eh? And you're probably one of the coolest professors there, I'm sure.
It was fun. And, you know, I look back on those days now. And by the way, when they finally hand you your gold watch and they're saying goodbye to you, it's hilarious, because I was there for 20, I thought it was 30 years. But Jim and I, and I will say this, Jim Valance guest lectured for me at least once per year for every year that I was there. I mean, what a prince of a guy he is. Yeah, he's a very generous man, and he's a really good mentor, a really good teacher and lecturer. I mean, you can't say enough about about the goodness and the uh, the knowledge base that Jim has. So he was very generous. Anyway, Jim and I once sat down and he said, I think it was 29 years that you were there, or that we were there. And
Who's
so
counting, right?
I got invited. I got a memo, something in the mail saying this is how it ended, right? And they said, you're invited to come to this faculty luncheon or something like this. Oh, great, let's go to lunch. I'm invited to lunch. And I got there, and all of a sudden they called my name up. There was a few others there too. And it was like kind of getting your diploma. I had to walk across the stage and shake hands with the dean of the university. And he handed me, I think it was like a little plaque and a matching gold pen and pencil set, and shook my hand. And then I had to walk off the stage. And I looked around and thought, I think I was just fired. Which was true.
I doubt it. I was going to say the dean was probably thinking, I got to walk across the stage and shake hands with Al Harlow. He was probably the nervous one. I think he was probably the nervous. And as far as your 15 minutes of fame, I have to take issue with that as a huge fan. I think you're selling yourself short there, Al. I really want to get into some of your new projects because we have a lot to talk about there. You mentioned already the autobiography Flying, which is hopefully coming out this summer.
Yes, indeed.
And that will be available at all the usual venues, like the bookstore, online, right?
Yes. Thank you. Yes, the publishers are now lecturing me that, so the average book length, and you're allowed 39 photographs, all that kind of stuff, right? So I'm actually editing it down. It's so funny because somebody pre-COVID said, "Well, now, Al, I know your book's coming out. Now you know how these rock and roll biographies they have a little color added, are you going to embellish at all, and this kind of thing?" I said, "Are you kidding?" I said, "I have to leave things."
I don't have to.
Truth is stranger than fiction.
Right. I know about some shenanigans, and you don't have to fabricate anything at all.
I know we can talk.
We talked about this yesterday. And so the Al Harlow Band, can you talk about the two new albums that you have coming out there, Al?
Oh, thank you for asking. Yes, all modesty aside. Well, I guess to paint in a little bit of backstory here, I know that there always was this slight myth, which I was never comfortable with, which, here in my dotage, I hope to paint a complete picture now. But we were talking about the Seeds of Time earlier, and even, before that, and how, all of us kids, we got the music bug and we made that our passion and our life's vocation. So I was always Al Harlow, the solo guy. My band was called Al Harlow. And, speaking of the posters and all that kind of stuff, I've got all the paraphernalia and so forth. And I also have the studio tape. So in other words, when the Seeds of Time was busy morphing into Prism, I stepped outside of that picture frame for 5 minutes, which was the 5 minutes that Bruce Fairbairn put these guys in the studio. So the first Prism album was like every musician in Vancouver. I think every song had a different bass player and keyboard player on it. You know what I mean? It was a community effort. And then they had to sort of, okay, guys, it looks like this thing's going to take off. We better rally around this thing. And that's where the Seeds of Time, solidified the Prism idea. But at that moment, I was across town and I was recording the first Al Harlow album. And what is curious, what is thought-provoking to me is at that moment, Rocket Norton and I were living together. We were roommates. And he would come home every night with the tapes, of what they were doing in the studio over here, which turned out to be the first Prism record, right? And I was bringing home the daily rushes, you know what I mean? Like the work in progress of the studio that I was working in. And we would be sitting there at 2 o'clock in the morning and we would be playing each other our tapes. Well, nobody knew, again, that this set of tapes wouldn't go off and be chart toppers. So, I was making my album at the very same time that the first Prism album was being made. So I've just recently, as I was moving into my new house here, I discovered all these tapes. I found them, they were in my storage area. And so I took them to Ray Roper of Stone Bolt, who runs his studio, and he has a very good remastering system there. And we digitized and remastered all of my early studio tapes. So on those tapes, you will hear the early versions of songs that Prism later re-recorded, like Take Me Away and Flying and Nickels and Dimes. All those songs were on the first Al Harlow record, which never got released. So that's the two albums that we're putting out here. The brand new one, which I would love to talk about, because I'm so proud of my production team, my guys, that they kind of tricked me into doing it. So my brand new album is called Al Harlow Now, and for lack of a better title, it's me now. But to sort of prove that there always was an Al Harlow solo guy, it's not like a case where the guy in Prism suddenly gets this crazy idea to go solo. Like, no, I was already solo. So the archival.
I love the title. I love the title of this all.
Then, yeah. So there's the now, and then the archival album of the old studio tapes, the remixes, is called Al Harlow Then Before the Beginning.
It's perfect. It's a little bit cheeky.
A little bit cheeky, because a Prism fan, a Prism fan will say, "Oh, before Prism, right?" Like, yes, that's before the beginning.
Right. And so let's talk about the new album. I was listening to a track, "Let It Go," which I love, and that's not to be confused with the theme song, the overplayed theme song from Frozen. But
right.
"Let It Go," I love, because you hit some of those money notes that I talk about that made me absolutely fall in love with your voice years ago. And so where was the inspiration for that song, Al?
Well,
what are we letting go?
Yes, what are we letting go? I love the vibe, and it's funny because as we cut the song in the studio, it made its way into our conversation. And people these days, I mean, all of us are I think society as a whole, as opposed to back in the old days where where dad brought home the paycheck and mom was the housewife and raised the kids, and there was no therapy back in those days. You know what I mean? Like you didn't address your issues. You just shut your mouth and got on with it, right? And so now
walk it off.
That's right. It's that British stiff upper lip stoicism.
Right.
So now, of course, we take ownership for our issues and we work through things and we try to get to the bottom of why we are the way we are, And so this "let it go," of course, means, hey, man, let go of it, And so I did not write that song. I wish I had. But it was really charming how this happened. I got a phone call from Kevin Stewart Swain, my mentor and my new best friend, Kevin. And it turns out that we both grew up in North Vancouver. Well, he moved from England, and but he was a few years younger than me, so we did not go to school together. So I never really knew Kevin in the old days when we were all running around getting in trouble with this rock and roll thing. So he was one of the younger kids, But he ended up playing with Barney Bentall and who else? Idolize and stuff, So he was there. He was on the scene, and he's done gigs with Stone Bolt and all this kind of stuff. So I became aware of Kevin later on. And so one day Kevin phoned me and he says, I got a gig for you. And this was during the era of the jams, where you bring in like celebrity jams. Like, so Randy Bachman would show up to a jam and the whole evening would be jamming, and Randy would walk in the door, somebody like this, right? And do a set. And so I got hired for a couple of those. And then Kevin phoned me again and said, "Okay, I got a studio session for you." In other words, I thought I'm just being hired to play on somebody's session. Like, what do you want? You slide guitar, that's usually what it is, lead guitar, background vocals. What is it? He goes, yeah, something like that. So I showed up to the studio and they said, "Okay, we want you to sing these songs." They had 3 songs sitting there. I said, "Well, who is it?" Like, there's just, and the engineer and producer and the owner of the studio is a very talented young man named Scott Young. And he's a great drummer. It turns out he's a great singer. He's a great guitar player and bass player. Like, who is this guy? So here comes another new guy. And they said, "Well, here's the lyrics. We want you to sing this song. And I said, well, what do you mean you want me to sing it? Aren't I just doing the la la la, you know, the background vocals in the chorus? No, no, no. You're the lead singer. And now I'm totally confused. I said, well, who is this? What is it? Oh, well, never mind. It's just, you know, it's just a demo publisher project, you know, something like that. Oh, okay, all right, you know. So anyway, over the next couple of days, I sang 3 songs. And so finally, I'm really curious, because so far there's only been 3 of us in the room. Whoever the mysterious, you know, band or whatever this is, you haven't told me. And they smiled and said, "This is your next album."
Wow.
This project is called Al Harlow. So they were grabbing me by the scruff of the neck, and they said, "Look, Al, you're overdue here, man. We want to hear the next Al Harlow album." And I mean, I choked. I mean, the tears came. And I said, "Yeah." I said, "You guys, really?" And they said, "Yeah. Now you bring us the rest of the songs. This is going to be a 10-song album, and I hope you have, you know, 7 or 8 more songs." So out of those 3 that we did, one of them we're going to put on the next record. It was a good song, but "Let It Go" was the first song. And then there's another one on the album called "I Believe." And I was graciously invited to redo the lyrics on that. So I got a kind of a co-writer credit on that. And Mike Fraser mixed that for us. And man, anyway, it's killer stuff. So, you know, I think I have bragging rights because I stepped into my own album when they started it without me, you know.
You didn't really have a choice.
Oh, yeah. And "Let It Go" was just rocking. I said, holy smokes, you guys, like, this rocks. And Sean Kelly, who plays with Lee Aaron, was on guitar.
Yeah.
And at that point, I had not met him, you know. And Kevin Stewart Swain was on bass, and he also plays guitar on that song. And so, you know, I really dug it because as the album was going on from there, we did a couple of co-writes. Like Scott Young and I wrote one song together. I wrote the lyrics to one of his songs. And Kevin came in with a complete song. And it was so funny because with Kevin's song, it kept changing. The lyrics kept changing. And it went from these sort of, it was kind of like, "I hate myself for loving you," one of those kind of things. And it turned into "My mind is running away with you." And I said, "Kevin, that's a great title." But the song kept changing. Yeah. And I said, "Kevin, why do you keep changing this song?" He says, "I'm watching you. I'm watching your life. And as I'm learning more about you," meaning me, he said, I'm writing a biography about you." And so he finally finished the song. But by the time he got there, he had rewritten it 3 times. And he says, "These lyrics are what you are going through right now." And he's right, because I was busy falling in love and doing all kinds of things like that. So he says, "This is your life." So anyway, on some of the, I wrote the rest of the songs. So on some of them, I'm playing all the guitars and I'm, you know, this kind of thing. And I'm sort of in command of everything. And of course, I'm the lead singer on the whole thing. But I got the biggest thrill out of walking into a situation. And I remember David Bowie saying this about one of his albums, which I can't remember now. And when he was doing the promo interviews for his latest album, and he sort of had this sly smile, and he said, "I'm not actually playing guitar or saxophone." He says, "I don't play a note on this record. I'm just the lead singer." And I thought, no one has ever asked me to come in and just be the lead singer. And that's how this started, you know? So the first 2 songs, I was just the lead singer. And that gave me a thrill. And so that really put a lot of energy behind me. So I wrote the rest of most of the other songs. And there are some of the songs, even a couple that I wrote and, you know, co-produced and all the rest of it and directed. But I got other people to play guitar on it, and that gives me a real cheeky little thrill.
Absolutely. What a great backstory to the album.
Well,
and I think, you know, that song that's written 3 times, I think it's going to make me listen to it differently.
Yeah, "My mind is running away with you." And there's one song on there called He Don't Live Here No More. And we knew that it was going to be this really spooky, bluesy, minor key slide guitar thing, And so one day, my producer, Scott Young, said, okay, Al, tomorrow or whatever it is, next session, be ready. That's when your slide guitar goes on. And I said, Scott, I'm not going to play slide on that. And both he and Kevin said, what do you mean? Like, you're the slide guitar. And I do play slide on other songs on the record. And I said, no, I've got Sean Varol of Wide Mouth Mason. He's going to do it. And they said, no, you have to do it. You have to do it. And I said, nope, Sean's going to do it. And so Sean, I was going to say that Sean Varol came in, but he didn't. I sent him an email. I said, Sean, would you play slide on one of my songs? And I sent him the song, and he said, yeah, sure. So I'm thinking, okay, we have to have mood lighting, and we have to ask him, do you like Perrier or San Pellegrino? Do you like lattes or espresso? Like, do you like a cozy chair to sit in? We'll have a whole bunch of guitar amps for you. I'm thinking, oh boy, we're going to have Sean Varol on this record. I couldn't believe that he said yes to begin with, Anyway, about 2 days later, I got a Dropbox thing from him, and he says, here you go. And he did it at home, And like within 48 hours, he said, let me know if you like this. And I had told him, I said, this is a really scary song, It's a song about breaking free from your dance with the devil. It's a song about overcoming addiction is what it's about. And I said, Sean, your slide guitar has to be frightening. It has to be scary. And I said, I want two.
Like addiction.
Yeah, it has to be real scary. And I said, also, I want you to play 2 slide guitar parts, and I want them to be fighting each other. Like, this is not some duet from the Allman Brothers. I said, this is 2 slide guitars that are angry. There's a battle going on. And Sean said, leave it to me. And he did it. And that's what's on the record.
He created enough of a visual for him.
Oh, we're going to do that.
It in his head and pulled it off, right?
We're going to make a video, and we're going to invite Sean to be in that video. And I really want the world to hear what Sean Varol does on slide guitar on that song on my album. So, I have bragging rights because I can brag about all my guys, like Scott Young and Kevin Stewart Swain, and Daryl Hebert is the keyboard player. And Jamie Bowers plays some keyboards and guitar. So these are my guys, and I mean, it's my album, I was the boss, it's my record, but I'm just so grateful. I was surrounded with this production team, and it doesn't get any better.
So some really exciting things happening for you. And there's problems coming out soon, with the COVID happening and stuff like that. We're not really sure when. But we're assuming that both albums and the book, the autobiography Flying, will be out maybe this summer, possibly.
Well, yes, it's this year. It's a nice way because the 3 make sense with each other. Like, put out the Al Harlow now. Here's the brand new record. We're filming videos for it right now. And but yeah, COVID really, of course, everybody got thrown off balance by COVID. So I was talking to the record companies, and they were saying, well, right now nothing's happening. We don't quite know what to do. And of course, when we all get back to work, all of us, there's going to be a lot of people releasing records who held back during COVID. So yeah, there's going to be a lot of traffic out there, but we're going to pick and choose our moment. And yeah, we want to make it count. It'll be effective, we hope.
Right. Well, we can't wait. I personally can't wait. And will you send me an autographed copy of the book?
Absolutely. Are you kidding? It's coming right now.
I'm just being
well, it does make sense because if the new album comes out and then the backstory, the then before the beginning, and you hear all the studio tracks, a couple of which were later done as Prism songs. So there's Al's backstory. Yes, kids, I've been doing this since I was a kid. And then the book would be the perfect icing on the cake. So all we have to do is throw in a free T-shirt, and there's the bundle.
A bundle.
Bundle.
Well, when the book comes on, maybe we have you back to talk specifically about that and the albums too. because you're delightful. I would absolutely have you back on. You are welcome to drop over here anytime.
Oh, Kelly, you make it all happen. You make it all so worthwhile. You're not to blow smoke here, but your questions are so delightfully informed, and you're making this very easy, Kelly. Thank you.
Oh, well, thank you, Al. And we still have one more thing to talk about. Another new project that you have coming up, and it's the Cars and Guitars web TV, the TV web series. Can you tell us a bit about that, Al?
Well, yeah, and this is one of those things that's been gestating for a long time, pre-COVID. So yes, the only addictions I really have left now, besides trail mix and San Pellegrino water, but and there's a lot of people out there who will say that we have the same disease. So one of them is called GAS, G-A-S, which is guitar acquisition syndrome.
I love it.
So yes, if you're a guitar person, then of course you have GAS, G-A-S, and it's a running joke with all my guitar buddies. So yes, I've had this bad habit of collecting guitars my whole life, and so we're turning that into a like a web TV series. So we're starting to film those right now, and of course it's just a thrill for me to do that because every issue. Every edition, well, here's another guitar, and everything has a backstory. Everything has a delightful story, and there are some famous guitars out there, and I happen to be fortunate enough to own a few of those. And then the other bad habit,
you've got a carve. You got a little carve
yeah.
thing going on too, don't you?
Yes. Well, my son as well. He collects guitars. Well, we collect them together. Some of them are mine, and some of them are his, and we argue over which ones belong to who. But I moved out to the country here, up the coastal country. So I'm north of Vancouver on the Sunshine Coast. And we've just got a nice little slice of paradise. So I built a car barn for the collection, with hydraulic lifts. So we can stack the cars up. And
Nice.
My son is the mechanic, not me. He works on them and does all this. So I like it. I like them to be done. All I have to do is turn the key and, drive to the car show and everything. So yes, we're doing cars and guitars, and then when your own collection runs out of cars, then you can invite your friends. So the drummer for the Headpins, Bernie Aubin, is also our agent. He runs Canadian Classic Rock, so he books all the bands. He books Street Hard and April Wine and Prism and Harlequin and everybody. And he's a bit of a car guy too. So he has just bought a brand new Corvette, the mid-engine Corvette C8. And I said, Bernie, would you come up to my place and put your car in my car show? And he says, yes, I will. And so I'm a member of a couple of car clubs, so I've got my Ferrari friends and my Jaguar friends. And I've been saying, I've got all these guest stars who are going to bring their Ferraris and their Bentleys and stuff over. So anyway, yeah, I've got a few cars here that I'm very happy, and they're kind of my babies. So the Jaguars and the Rolls Royces and the Thunderbirds, they're all here.
Wow. I'm thinking about getting a bike this summer.
Well, come on over. Well, yes, cars, guitars, and bikes. You're in the show.
Well, so much exciting stuff to come out, Al, and I really just can't wait for the the two new albums and the web TV series, and of course the book Flying, which my understanding is that you're having to scale it down a couple of hundred pages.
Yeah,
which is surprising to me. I would. Sorry, Al, go ahead.
Go ahead.
I was just going to say I would think the more information in an autobiography, the better it would be. Don't they know who you are?
Well, I guess that's something.
Call him up and go, don't you know who he is?
Yeah, don't you know who I think I am? I don't quite understand that. But 280 to 325 pages is standard. You know what I mean? And I mean, Gone with the Wind was 400 and something, or not that this is Gone with the Wind, but I guess there's a way to get away with it. And I've talked a little bit with my friend Andrew Oldham, the former Rolling Stones manager producer. He's a friend of mine. We talked about this, and his autobiography came out in 2 volumes. So you're allowed to do that. Like Bill Wyman did 2, Volume 1, Volume 2. So I don't know. I guess I'll do the first one and see if that flies, and if that works, then we can maybe look at a later one. It's so funny because people were saying, well, why have you waited so long? And I thought, well, I had this idea that I have to get to the end of my life first, but maybe that's not the smartest move. Yeah, do it while you're still alive.
That's kind of the idea, right? But I understand that, though, because I think if somebody was to write a book, like just for myself, for example, if I was to write a book, I'd be thinking, well, what if I miss some really cool stuff that hasn't happened yet? So I can understand where you kind of want to, hold off. And, Lee Aaron was here last week too, and she's also writing a book, and I love it because I think, one of the things that and I'm sure you'll agree with me, Al, is our generation of people. They are loyal fans. They have been with you for 40 plus years. And how amazing is it that it transcends generations? Friday night I ran into a young man, and he says, hey, he was maybe 21. He says, Kelly, who's your guest this Sunday? And I'm thinking I'm going to tell him Al Harlow from Prism, and he's not. I almost want to say you won't know who he is, young whippersnapper. But I said Al Harlow, and he goes, I love Prism, and he starts spouting off like Armageddon and Spaceship Superstar, and this is a 21-year-old kid, so you gotta love that, eh?
Oh, it's really touching, and I know we didn't really talk too much about Prism here, but yes, and I'm very, very grateful that we all came together, and Prism was very much and continues to be very much a team effort, And of course, in some ways, that is the main mothership. It's the highlight, and we're all grateful for that. And I'm always surprised, and I noticed it over the years. And depending on the venue, like say like an afternoon outdoor concert, like an all ages concert, for example, excuse me. There are like 18-year-old kids in the front row singing along with these songs, because we're still, radio is still very kind to us. We're still on the on the radio. And I always, my little joke to myself was that as you look back to about the 20th row, you see the middle generation who discovered us, in the 1990s or, turn of the century fans, the 2000 era fans, and then in the back row you see the original fans, and they're twirling the car keys to their Lexus, and they found a babysitter for tonight. You know what I mean? They've already had dinner, and all these married couples. Yeah, so all the old people are at the back. Hilarious. So I'm so grateful for that, because yes, you're right. It does transcend generations, and I really enjoy talking to the young fans because they know the songs better than I do. They know the story too. They know the backstory.
Right. Really, yeah, it's a beautiful thing. It's a beautiful thing. And we're running out of time here. But before we go, we were talking earlier before the show. Did you want to share a juicy little story about Lee Aaron and her husband John Cody?
Oh yes.
Because,
we're very good friends. Yes. And I don't think Lee Aaron minds me using her name, Karen. So yes, John, Cody, and Karen and I are good friends. And actually, John's going to be on one of my upcoming albums. I got the next 2 albums written, and John's going to be the drummer on my. I'm doing kind of a pinups, like B-sides and album cuts, songs that I grew up on, that idea. And John has agreed to be the drummer on that. We're kind of doing it together. But yes, in 2001, if I dare go back there, A Space Odyssey, John was my roommate. We were both having marital troubles at that time, and I was living in my big house on the hill in North Vancouver, and John was going through a divorce at that time, and I don't think he'd mind my saying that. And so he became John moved into my house. I was all alone in this big house, and John moved in. And he had started working for Karen. He had become Lee Aaron's drummer at that time. He was just doing shows, Right. And anyway, there were a couple of times when John walked in the front door, he was not alone. He had this lovely lady with him, and I already knew Karen. We were already friends. And so,
You're thinking, right? Done, buddy.
yeah, so they'd sashay into the dining room, so I would sort of light the candles and, turn the lighting down and making it romantic, and then I would leave the room, so I
You're
had
like the wingman.
yes, yeah. So I felt quite privileged. I think I was kind of I got to play Cupid, so I watched their romance blossom, and at least part of it blossomed in my house, and I feel a kind of an attachment to their burgeoning romance. And now, of course, they're happily married. They got 2 beautiful kids, and it's a wonderful story.
20 years later. So well done.
20 years later.
Well done on that part. Yeah, thank you for sharing that with us. And thank you for just sharing so much of the new stuff, the old Prism. Viewers are loving it. I'm noticing the comments that are coming in here, and my sister is watching Leanne, and she's like, "This is awesome," and she's been a huge fan for years. Gary Drayton, who you might know, is, "Hey Al, great job, Kelly." Glenn Burke from Value is enjoying the interview. Like so many people, we're just so looking forward to you being here today, myself included. And I'm glad that I managed to play host and not dorky fan, because this morning I was thinking, I am such a fan. I have to remember to act like a host and just not be all verklempt and dorky.
Oh, Mark,
like
Kelly, thank you.
I just am now.
You're the best. You are a most gracious host, and I'm very happy to meet you and to be part of this. And hello to everybody out there. And I should add too that Prism is going back into the studio this next year as well. So we'll see what happens there too. Yeah, Prism is not dead in the water. We're all looking forward. Actually, truth be told, the phone is ringing, and we're actually booking shows now. We've actually got some contracts for shows that are now solidly booked coming up this next year. And we're talking about, we're taking Prism back into the studio as well.
Nice. Well, we are going to be looking forward to that. And on my bucket list, Al, would be to have the entire Prism band on the show. Well, sure. And so we're going to keep our fingers crossed about that.
I can do that. I have their phone numbers. I can do that.
Do you know them? You got a little connection there.
Personal friends of mine.
Right on. Al, you're delightful. You are welcome to drop by here absolutely anytime.
Oh, Kelly, it takes one to know one.
Oh, thank you so much. It's just been great chatting with you, and I can't thank you enough for being here. And we can't wait to see what's when the book and the 2 albums coming out, and the new stuff from Prism, who we all love, and of course the Cars and Guitars. So continued success, Al, and we will be talking to you real soon.
Well, thank you, Kelly. And yes, as they say, to be continued.
To be continued. There will be a part 2.
Thanks, Kelly.
Thanks so much. Thank you, Al. Thank you so much for watching, everybody. Stay tuned. In about half an hour, I have a big announcement for next week's guest. Once again, until we see you next week, stay safe and sane, and take care of each other. Bye-bye.